One thing I'll say about the people who run the financial system, in my experience, they love to everything's a prototype. They're constantly prototyping. Here's the thing. If you go to a group of the most talented software developers in the world and you say, we want to build a control grid and we're willing to pay you guys a fortune to help us, they're all going to say no because they don't want to help you build a control grid. But if you persuade them that there's this fabulous new tool and it's going to help them, make everybody free, and plus they can make a lot of money, then you're off to the races and you can get them prototype. And I've seen them do it so many times. You see the cycles and you see them do this again and again and again. And the problem with me is I'd rather be poor than be a patsy. So I'd rather have $100 that's mine than $1,000 that can be snatched at any moment. I mean, one, you shrink the pie terribly because you just end innovation. Everybody's walking around on pins and needles if they're lucky, otherwise they're slaves. And the problem is once you allow this, even if the people doing it have good intentions, where it can go and be hijacked is just frightening. So I don't know if I was lucky or unlucky enough to have my fortune stolen from me early, but it got me totally clear about what's important is not whether the stock market goes up or down, but what's important is whether the stocks are mine or, Mr. Global can snatch them whenever he wants. And it's the same with the crypto. It's the same with the bank deposits. It's the same with everything. So to me, this is the issue we're focused on. What can we as an individual or as a citizen working with the state and local legislature do to make it very difficult, if not impossible, for automated systems to basically snatch away our individual and financial rights and our property rights? The central banks have been steadily buying, but part of that buying is we're reallocating gold around the world. So you're seeing much more balanced holdings around the world. Although, if you look at various estimates of what China really has, it may be going unbalanced the other way. But I think you're seeing a much more balanced foundation for whatever this new financial system is going to be because you've rebalanced the gold globally. I was at a Bitcoin conference in 2017 and upsetting everybody because I said, the central bankers love Bitcoin because you're buying Bitcoin and they're free to buy all the gold. They don't want competition. Anyway, but what happened was at that conference, I had just read, there's a survey that looks at the 100 largest owners of land in America. And I had read it in 2008, and then I hadn't looked at it until right before the conference. And I realized the top 100 landowners had doubled their holdings from 2008 to 2017. So in 9 years, they weren't buying Bitcoin. Yeah, they were buying the real stuff. It's a rebalancing of the financial system from G7 to what Terry Misson calls a C4-5, which is Asia's rising and you're rebalancing the gold between the Western worlds and Asia. I'm assuming it's that XRP and Ripple will be exceptionally important to whatever the train tracks are they're building. I don't see Bitcoin as being an important part of that. And the question is, how will they use Bitcoin going forward? And my concern is they're going to try and dump it on sovereign governments so that the whales can get out because it'll essentially be over. Now, they could also continue to pump it and use it for a variety of purposes. From an infrastructure standpoint, Bitcoin is not an efficient payment system. It's been used as a digital asset, not as a payment mechanism, and it doesn't have a fundamental utility. The true cost of inflation can't be seen just by looking at somebody's money. You have to look at what it does to their time, because part of the automation game is to push the work back onto you. And so your time budget is constantly being hiccuped by institutions that are pushing back work onto you. So in a healthy financial system, you want to have excellence in both. You want to have analog options and you want to have digital options, and you want both to be excellent and there to be, ease of going in and out of both of them. And so to me, any great financial system is going to have an analog. It's part of what keeps it healthy and keeps it grounded in our physical reality. If you look at the benefits of cash, the first is if I spend $100 in your neighborhood and it goes through 100 transactions around the neighborhood, if we're using cash, when it gets to the 100th transaction, it's still $100. If it's digital by the last transaction, because practically a lot of that's going to be credit card, it's going to be gone. The financial system is going to extract 100% of value at some, depending on what the velocity is. So you want cash for that reason. The second reason you want cash is electricity does not always work. And what we've seen around the world again and again and again, cyclones in New Zealand, floods in East Tennessee and Western North Carolina, all around the world, you have these disasters. And if you have cash, your financial system keeps functioning. If you don't have cash, people can starve. It's that dangerous not to have cash. And it's interesting because some of the central banks have now come out in Scandinavia and said, it was a mistake to cancel or push to try and cancel cash. We're going to try and revive cash. So natural disasters. But the third thing is you can't go to a complete financial transaction control unless you kill analog. So one of the guardrails we want on state legislation is to say you always have to give somebody a non-programmable alternative. Sure, you can use programmable money with them all day long. You can use money with an automatic third lock if they want, but if they don't want to use that, they've got an alternative. That alternative is going to be cash. Another one of our model legislation is a citizen should have the right to lead a non-digital life and not have to have a smartphone so they can do business with the government or pay their taxes. And remember, people who are sensitive to electromagnetics, and really as a matter of health, they can't use, digital equipment, or they shouldn't. It can be really painful for them. Anyway, so there are multiple reasons why analog provides a healthy balance, but you always want to maintain that healthy balance. And that's why one of the things we can all do is roll back the push for an all digital system by just keeping cash and checks and the analog alive. I think a lot of the money that's been pulled out of the U.S. finances, I think that money has been reinvested into building, whatever is called the breakaway civilization. Think of it as a new civilization with new rules, separate and as a legal matter. And some of that money has been invested back in. So if you look at our current economy, we have an overt side, we have a covert side, but then we have this separate sort of new system coming up that I refer to as the breakaway. And I think money goes back and forth. Our overt economy is not a closed economy. There's the covert side to it, which is all the illegal businesses and sort of the intelligence and other covert operations. But then you have this second system. And the question is, of course, where is all that money? And it's interesting, as the money was disappearing from the U.S. government, the offshore havens were exploding in size. If you draw it out on a chart, it looks like, two planes taking off together. And so one of the questions is all that money sitting in an endowment ready to run a world government? I've tried to trace where the money theoretically could go, sort of as a conceptual matter, but I think they've built an awful lot of infrastructure, which is something we don't see when we walk around. So much more impressive ships in the sky, much more stuff going on underground. There's another infrastructure here, especially because, as a society, we're using 50 and 100-year-old legacy technology. I mean, I just know I'm in the Netherlands because my partners here, I first met in 2012 because they led the breakthrough energy conferences in the Netherlands and the US, as well as the secret space program, because a lot of the breakthrough energy is associated with sort of the space programs. And if you just look at the technology we've had for over 100 years to dramatically reduce the price of energy, we know this technology works. We know we can run cars from water. We know all of this stuff is feasible. And the question is, when is it going to be allowed and integrated into the regular economy? Your guess is as good as mine, but somebody's got it. So when the head of Lockheed Skunk Works said in 1996, we now have the technology to take ET home, I take him for his word. I think he was telling the truth. I think there's a lot of technology that's going to come out of the lab over the next 10 to 15 years. So the other day, they built literally a modular nuclear plant that they can put in an airplane and fly to a military base, right? If you just look in material science, if they can get the price of graphene down, I mean, what you can do with materials is just unbelievable. So I think when Trump or these guys talk about a golden age, I don't think they're being ridiculous. I think they understand the possibilities of this technology and they get all excited about it. But the problem is there's no way to communicate it, in a way that people can really understand, because the guys who want to make money from it want to, keep it to themselves. So there are real conflict issues on how this technology comes out and who knows about it. But I think the potential for technology to dramatically improve productivity is enormous. We're in a situation where, to a certain extent, things are moving so fast and the conversation is so public that things are out of control. And if you look at what it takes to manage it, the reason they're racing for a control grid is they're worried about how in the world, if breakthrough energy is available and people can live forever and you can run your car off of water, do you know how that's going to wreak havoc with the pension funds?
Yeah.
So if you're managing it, you're nervous. So in the 1990s, I did a project where I took all the data on federal money and credit and tried to look at it on a place-based basis. And one of the things I realized was that the wealth potential, if we could re-optimize to really grow the economy and use markets and use meritocracy, the wealth potential was fantastic. And that was before I knew about a lot of the technological developments. The problem with that model was the people who run things wouldn't control it anymore. And they would be terrified that the risk management wouldn't happen because it would get too out of control. They don't trust the general population to do it. So we ended up with, okay, let's dumb everybody down and take tight control. And this is where we are. The reset, it started basically, I think, when they reviewed the Going Direct reset in August 2019. They started in with a repo desk and then the pandemic, but it's ongoing. Because this time they're not planning on moving from a duopoly between sterling and the dollar to the dollar. Or they're not planning on moving from the guilders to the sterling. This time they're planning on basically ending currency. And that's the biggest reset yet. What I don't see them doing is a gold standard or gold currency. I do see them using gold to settle accounts on a wholesale basis, but I don't see gold happening in a powerful way in the currency in a retail capacity. If you go back through history, the best currencies are fiat currencies with excellence in governance. But I don't think they're going to tie their own hands with a gold system, just like they're not going to tie, their IT hands with a closed database. So I think gold is going to be very, very important as a foundation to the whole system, but I don't think that's going to translate into a gold standard. Now, here's the problem with the control grid. You don't really even have a currency. You just have a control system.